hand closes on her wrist. Not Thuron's hand. Not the Lycan King's. A stranger's hand, cold as river stone, and Ren feels her pulse stop under the silver chains they put on her that morning. The hall, 400 nobles in furs and gold, goes quiet the way a forest goes quiet before a storm. Thuron is 3 steps from the dais, mid-greeting, the words still half on his tongue. He stops. He does not turn his head fast. He turns it slow. And in that slow turn, every wolf in the room understands something has gone very, very wrong. The stranger smiles. He says loud enough for the chandeliers to hear, "I claim her." And Ren, 22 years old, a servant girl yesterday, a queen this morning, feels the silver chain on her throat go tight. Believe me, what happens next will not leave this hall the same. Stay with me. You have to understand who she was before any of this. Ren was nobody. She came to the Aldermore Keep at 16, a kitchen girl, the kind of girl the old cooks call useful, and the young guards do not call at all. She carried water. She swept the long stone corridors. She learned which floorboards creaked outside the council chamber, and she learned to step around them, because servants who eavesdrop in a Lycan keep do not last long. She had brown hair she kept braided tight. She had hands that healed slow because the lye in the soap was strong. She had no family that anyone could name. And for 6 years that was her life: kettle, broom, candle, bed. 6 years of not being seen. Now here's the thing about not being seen. It teaches you to see other people very, very well. She saw the king the way the cook saw him. From the corner. From the shadow of a doorway. From the back of the great hall on feast nights, while the silver platters went past. Thuron Aldermore. 36 years old. Silver hair already, even though wolves keep their color long. A scar that ran the length of his jaw from a war they did not talk about. He did not laugh much. He did not raise his voice ever. The cook said he had been waiting 40 years for his fated mate, that the Lycan King's bond does not come on schedule, and that Thuron had simply outlasted hope. She listened to that, and she did not feel pity. She felt something else. She felt a long quiet inside him that matched a long quiet inside her, and she did not know yet what to do with that feeling. He noticed her on a Thursday. She was carrying a tray of bread up the back stairs, and one of the loaves rolled. He caught it. That was all. He caught the loaf and he handed it back to her and he said, "Mind the 3rd step. It tips." That was the first sentence he spoke to her. "Mind the 3rd step. It tips." She nodded. She did not curtsy because her hands were full, and she went on. And he stood at the bottom of the stairs and watched her go, and the head of his household guard, an old wolf named Bran, watched the king watch her, and Bran did not say anything, but Bran was a careful man, and after that night Ren was moved from the kitchens to the upstairs linens. Nobody told her why. They just moved her closer. He spoke to her again at the harvest. He spoke to her on the night the southern envoy left, and the keep was loud with relief. He spoke to her in the herb garden where she went to cut rosemary, and he was there because, he said, he liked the way it smelled after rain. She believed him then. She still believes him now. He never put a hand on her in those months. He never pulled rank. He never sent her gifts in front of others. He never made her feel watched. He only ever made her feel chosen, quietly, the way you choose a chair you mean to sit in for the rest of your life. And then one spring night on the long stone balcony that looks out at the Pine Ridge, he asked her, not commanded, asked, "Ren, would you stay?" And she did not say yes because her throat closed up. She just nodded. And he nodded back. And that was the whole of it. The morning of the mating ball, they put silver chains on her. You should understand the chains. They are not punishment. In Lycan custom, a chosen mate is presented to the pack bound in silver, the metal that hurts our kind, the metal that proves she is mortal, breakable, given freely. The chains are removed by the king himself, in front of the pack, at the moment of the bond. It is an old ritual. It is meant to say, she came willingly into a place that could destroy her, and we will protect her with our lives. Ren stood very still while the women fastened the chain at her throat and the cuffs at her wrists. She wore a pale green gown the color of new leaves. Her hair was loose for the first time in 6 years. And when she walked into the hall on Thuron's arm, 400 nobles bowed, and the hall held its breath, and she felt, for one shining second, like a person whose name was finally being read aloud. That is the world Vexen Drac walked into. You did not see him come in. Nobody saw him come in. He came in dressed as a noble from the Eastern Reach, with a falsified seal and a falsified escort, and the guards at the door looked at his papers and let him through, because the guards at the door had been told to expect lords from every corner of the kingdom, and his papers were good. He took a goblet from a passing tray. He moved through the crowd slowly, the way a predator moves through tall grass. He has black hair cut short. He has the kind of face that was handsome before something happened to it, and is now only sharp. He was, 10 years ago, the eldest son of an alpha line in the southern packs. He was exiled for killing his own brother in a dispute over the line of inheritance, and his pack cast him out, and he has lived since then in the borderlands the way exiled alphas live, taking, never asking, building a small private grudge into a very large public one. He came tonight for one reason. He came tonight to humiliate Thuron Aldermore in front of 400 witnesses by taking the king's chosen mate as a war prize. Not because he wanted her, because he wanted Thuron to lose her. And so, at the moment Thuron stepped forward to formally present Ren to the pack, the moment the herald lifted the staff and opened his mouth to announce the bond, Vexen Drac stepped out of the crowd, walked the 8 feet to where Ren stood, and closed his hand around her wrist. The herald did not finish the word. The hall went silent so fast you could hear the candle flames hiss. Ren did not scream. She had not been raised to scream. She looked down at the strange hand on her wrist, and she looked up at the strange face above it, and the silver cuff bit into her skin where his fingers pressed. Thuron, 3 steps from her, stopped. He did not turn fast. He turned slow. He looked at Vexen. He looked at the hand on Ren's wrist. He looked back at Vexen's face. And in a voice that was very low and very calm, he said, "Take your hand off her." Vexen smiled wider. "I claim her," he said again, "by right of Challen. She is unbonded. The bond has not been spoken. Under the old code, any alpha may stake a claim until the words are said." A murmur ran through the hall. Some of the older lords lowered their eyes, because in the old code, technically, he was not wrong. Thuron did not move. He said, "Take your hand off her." "That is the first time I am asking. There will not be a fourth." Vexen did not let go. He turned to the hall and he raised his voice, the way a man raises a torch. He said, "Lycan King, for 40 years your pack has waited for you to find your mate. For 40 years you have ruled alone, and now, on the very night you finally name her, you mean to give her my protection. No, I think not. I think tonight the southern packs remind the north that an alpha king is only as strong as the man who can hold what he claims. So hold her, Thuron. If you can." Thuron's jaw moved once. "Just once." He said, "Take your hand off her." "That is the second time I am asking." Ren was looking at him now. Just at him. Not at Vexen, not at the hall, not at the chains. Just at Thuron. And Thuron, in the middle of being publicly threatened, in the middle of 400 nobles waiting to see what their king would do, made one small movement that nobody else saw. He moved his free hand, the hand farthest from the crowd, and he turned the palm toward Ren. Just an inch. Just enough. It meant in the small private language they had built over a year of quiet evenings, "I see you. I am here. Do not be afraid," Ren breathed out. Vexen did not see it. Vexen was busy looking at the hall. Thuron said very softly, "Take your hand off her." "That is the third time I am asking." "There will not be a fourth," Vexen laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has prepared a speech for 10 years and is now finally delivering it. He said, "Then do not ask. Take her back, Lycan King. Take her back in front of your pack with your own teeth, or admit that the throne has gone soft. and he tightened his grip on Ren's wrist until the silver cuff cut a thin red line. She did not flinch. Thuron saw the line of blood. He saw it. The whole hall saw him see it. And the hall expected then what every hall has always expected from a Lycan king in this moment. It expected him to lunge. It expected him to shift, to roar, to tear. It expected blood on the marble. He did not. He looked at Vexen for a long moment. He looked at Ren. He gave her very small, a single nod. And then Thuron Aldermore, Lycan king of the north, did the strangest thing he could possibly have done. He turned around. He turned his back on Vexen Drac, and the hand on his mate's wrist, and the line of blood on her skin. He walked the 7 steps to the dais. He climbed the 3 low stairs. And he sat down on his throne. He sat down. He did not draw a weapon. He did not say a word. He arranged his hands on the carved arms of the throne. He looked out at the hall. And he waited. The hall did not understand. Some of the younger lords looked at each other. Some of the older lords looked at the floor. Bran, the head of household, stood at the side wall with his hand on the hilt of his sword, and he did not move, because Bran had served Thuron for 20 years, and Bran understood that the king had just done something the hall would talk about for 100 years, even if the hall did not yet know what. Vexen on the floor blinked. He had prepared for many things. He had not prepared for this. The king had what? Conceded. Abandoned her. Was this the moment of his triumph? He looked around for applause. None came. The hall was waiting. The hall did not know what it was waiting for, but it was waiting. Ren, with the strange hand still on her wrist, with the chain still on her throat, looked across the marble at Thuron on his throne, and she did the bravest thing she would do in her life. She did not call for help. She did not weep. She just whispered very softly, so quietly that only the wolves close to her could hear it, Thuron, just his name. The hall 400 people, breathing, exhaled. If you are with me on this one, do me a favor, hit subscribe. Because what happened next is the moment the whole kingdom changed, and I want you here for the rest of it. Stay with me. Thuron rose from the throne. He did not rise fast. He rose the way a mountain rises out of cloud. He stood at the top of the 3 low stairs, and he looked at Vexen Drac across the length of the hall, and the hall, somehow, every person in it knew at the same instant to be quiet. He did not raise his arms. He did not lift his chin. He just opened his mouth, and from somewhere far below the floor of the world, he roared. It was not a battle cry. A battle cry is a sound you make on purpose. This was a sound that came up out of him, the way a wave comes up out of an ocean. It shook the chandeliers. The iron rings of candles above the hall swayed, and 3 of them dropped wax onto the marble in long, bright drops. It shook the standards on the wall, the long banners of the Aldermore line, gold wolf on black. It shook the wineglasses on the side tables, a thin high ringing under the deeper sound. And it went through every wolf in the hall, the way a key goes through a lock. Every single one of them, 400 bond-sworn alphas, betas, omegas, every wolf who had ever sworn fealty to the Aldermore line dropped to one knee. They did not choose to. Their bodies chose for them. It was the king's true voice, the alpha voice, the voice the bond answers, and the bond answered. Bran went down on his knee at the side wall. The old lords in the front row, men who had not knelt for anything in 30 years, went down. Even the herald, mid-breath, went to one knee with the staff still in his hand. And Vexen Drac, Vexen, who had no pack, Vexen, who had cut himself out of every bond 10 years ago, Vexen, who thought that exile had made him free, Vexen fell too. His knees buckled. He did not mean to kneel. His body did not ask him. His knees simply unlocked, and he went down on the marble in front of the woman whose wrist he was still holding, because an alpha voice that's strong does not need a bond to break a man. It only needs a man. Ren, standing above him in her silver chains, did not move. She had not been bound to the pack yet. The roar did not reach for her. She was the only person in the hall still standing besides Thuron. She looked down at Vexen on his knees, and then she looked across the hall at Thuron, and Thuron on the dais began to walk. He walked slow. He took his time. He came down the 3 low stairs of the dais, and he crossed the long marble floor between him and Vexen, and the only sound in the hall was the sound of his boots on the stone. Every wolf in the hall stayed on one knee. Nobody dared rise. He passed lords he had known since boyhood, and they kept their eyes on the floor. He passed Bran, and Bran did not look up. He reached Vexen Drac, who was on his knees with his hand still locked around Ren's wrist because his fingers, like his pride, did not know how to let go. And Thuron did not kill him. Hear me. He did not kill him. He could have. The hall would have understood. The old code would have allowed it. He did not. Instead, Thuron knelt, not all the way, just one knee, and he took Vexen's hand off Ren's wrist, finger by finger. He pried the thumb off first. He pried the index finger off second. He pried the middle finger off third. He took his time. He did not break any of them. He simply removed them, the way a man removes weeds from a garden bed. And when Vexen's hand was free of Ren, Thuron let it fall to the marble, and Vexen did not try to lift it again. Thuron stood. He turned to Ren. He took her hand, her free hand, not the bleeding one, and he raised it gently. Then he bent his head and he set his teeth, very lightly, against the side of her throat, just under the silver collar. Not deep. Not a wounding mark. A claiming mark, the visible, public, undeniable kind, the kind that says, in the language every wolf in the room understands, "She is mine, this is witnessed, and the bond is spoken." She did not flinch. She closed her eyes. When he lifted his head, there was a small dark crescent on her throat, just below the silver chain. The hall still kneeling saw it. 400 witnesses. It was done. He turned finally to Vexen. He spoke in a voice that was not loud and did not need to be, because the hall had been silent for a very long time. He said, "Vexen Drac of the Southern Reach, you are exiled from the 4 kingdoms of the Lycan North. You will be taken from this hall to the eastern border. You will be released across the river. If you set foot on Aldermore land again, no court will hear you. No herald will name you. No bond will catch you. You will simply not be." He paused. He said, "You came tonight to make me less. Instead, you made me ask, in front of all of these witnesses, 3 times, for something that was not yours. That is the only kindness you will have from me. Take it. Go." 2 of Bran's men rose. They had permission. They had been waiting for it, and they lifted Vexen Drac under the arms and they dragged him out, and Vexen did not fight because Vexen could not. His body was still remembering being on its knees. The doors at the back of the hall opened and closed. He was gone. Thuron turned back to Ren. The hall was still on one knee. He let them stay there for one more breath because he wanted them to remember. Then he raised one hand, palm out, and gave them leave. Slowly, like a tide turning, the pack rose. The chandelier steadied. The wax stopped dripping. Somewhere at the back of the hall a woman was crying, very quietly, one of the old Omegas, who had served 3 kings and had never seen anything like this. Thuron did not look at her. He looked only at Ren. He went down on one knee in front of her, properly this time, both hands on her hand, and the silver chain at her throat, the chain that all chosen mates wear into the hall, caught the light and held it. He did not say anything for a moment. He just looked up at her, 22 years old, kitchen girl, queen his. He reached up. He touched the silver cuff at her wrist, the one Vexen had bled. The cuff opened. He touched the cuff at her other wrist. That one opened too. He stood very close to her, and he reached behind her neck and he touched the clasp of the collar, and the silver chain at her throat fell, ringing onto the marble at their feet. The hall, all of them, everyone heard it fall. He took both of her hands. He looked at her, and in front of 400 witnesses, in a voice that was not quiet and was not loud and was simply true, he said, "You are no one's prize. You are mine because you chose me. And Ren the kitchen girl, Ren of no family, Ren who had spent 6 years not being seen, finally, for the first time in her life, was looked at by an entire room and did not look away. The hall did not cheer. The hall instead did something stranger. The hall bowed. Not to him. To her. The old lords first, then the younger ones, then the Omegas, then the household guard, and last of all Bran at the side wall, with his hand still on the hilt of his sword and tears in his eyes. They bowed to Ren. And Ren, who had carried water up the back stairs of this keep for 6 years, looked out at the people who had walked past her every day without seeing her, and she did not feel proud. She felt only that strange, deep quiet that Thuron carried, and she understood now that the quiet was love. It had always been love. It had only been waiting for somebody to come and stand in it. A year passed. Believe me, a year does not feel long when you are happy, and it does not feel short when you are loved. The kingdom changed slowly. Thuron opened the throne hall to the pack daily. Any wolf who wanted to bring a grievance, a question, a small private fear, could come to the long stone hall in the afternoons and sit on the benches and wait, and the king and the queen would hear them. The old lords grumbled at first. They said it was beneath the dignity of the throne. They said the king had grown soft. They said a hall that opens its doors will lose its walls. Thuron listened to all of it the way he listened to weather. He did not argue. He simply kept opening the doors. And after the 3rd month, the grumbling stopped, because the kingdom, it turned out, ran better when its people did not have to wait 6 months for an audience. The old lords got over it. They always do. Ren, queen now in pale green again, sat on the throne beside Thuron's, and she remembered every name, because she had been a kitchen girl, and a kitchen girl learns names the way a scholar learns books. She remembered the miller from the river town. She remembered the widow from the high pasture. She remembered the small boy who came in on his grandfather's hand to ask, very seriously, whether wolves were allowed to be afraid of the dark. Thuron answered that one himself. He said yes. He said the bravest ones often were. The boy went home satisfied. The grandfather wept on the way out. Now here's the thing. A kingdom does not change because a king roars. A kingdom changes because, after the roar, the king sits down and listens. Thuron walked beside her, not in front of her. That was the small thing the kingdom noticed and never stopped noticing. On the long stone corridor between the private rooms and the great hall, he walked at her shoulder. In the herb garden, he held the basket. At the harvest, when the long tables were set in the courtyard and the pack ate together, he served her plate before his own. The young alphas watched. The young omegas watched. The married couples in the village watched. Something in the kingdom began, very quietly, to shift. Young alphas in the border towns started walking at their mates' shoulders too. Old alphas in the mountain holds, men who had spent 50 years walking 3 paces in front, started, very awkwardly, slowing down. Their wives pretended not to notice, because pretending not to notice was how the older women had survived this long, but at night, in the small dark, they noticed. The kingdom did not announce any of this. The kingdom does not announce the things that matter most. The kingdom just lets them happen, one stone at a time, until the road is laid. A daughter was born in the 2nd spring. She came easy, the midwives said, the way easy is meant in a hall that has waited 40 years for a child. Thuron was in the room. That was the other thing the kingdom noticed. Like in kings by tradition, wait in the long stone corridor outside, with the lords, while the omegas and the midwives do the work. Thuron did not wait in the corridor. Thuron sat at his wife's side and held her hand and did not let go, even when she squeezed hard enough to leave 4 small bruises on his palm that he kept for a week and would not let the healers touch. Brown hair like her mother's. Pale gray eyes like her father's. They named her Lycan, which is an old word in the pine country and means first light through the trees. She was loud the way babies are loud, and she was held a great deal by a great many wolves because the household had never had a child in it, and the household had a great many spare arms. Bran, who was 64 years old by then, carried her around the keep on his shoulder during the long quiet afternoons, and Bran, who had killed 11 men in his life, sang to her in a low, rough voice, and the cooks pretended not to hear. Lycan said her first word at 14 months. She was on Ren's hip, in the throne hall in the afternoon, while a young farmer from the southern fields was telling Thuron a long, worried story about a fence dispute. Lycan reached for Ren's collar. There was no chain there anymore, only the small dark crescent of the claiming mark which had never faded, and she opened her small mouth and she said, very clearly, "Stay." Just that. "Stay." The farmer stopped mid-sentence. Ren looked down at her daughter. Thuron looked across at his wife. And Ren, after a very long moment, looked back at Thuron, and she remembered a balcony on a spring night, a man who did not command, a man who only ever asked, and she remembered nodding because her throat had been too full to speak. She nodded now the same way. Thuron nodded back. The farmer, who did not know any of this, was kindly waved on, and his fence dispute was solved before sundown. That evening they took Lycan out onto the long balcony that overlooks the Pine Ridge, the same balcony where Thuron had asked Ren to stay. The wind was warm. The pines were dark. Thuron carried Lycan on one arm and held Ren's hand with the other. The kingdom below them was lighting its evening lamps, 1,000 small windows coming awake in the valley, 1,000 small lives that did not know, and did not need to know, the story of how their queen had been a kitchen girl, and how an exiled alpha had reached for her wrist on a winter night, and how the entire hall had gone to its knees. The story did not need to be told. The story was already in the air they breathed. Ren leaned her head on Thuron's shoulder. She thought of Vexendrak, somewhere across the eastern river, alive, broken, alone. She did not hate him. She did not pity him. She simply did not think of him for very long. He had been the storm that proved the house. The house, it turned out, was solid. Thuron looked down at her. He said very softly, "Are you cold?" She said, "No." He said, "Are you tired?" She said, "A little." He said, "Should I take her?" She shook her head. Lycan was asleep already, the small heavy sleep of a child who has never not been safe. Ren said into the warm dark, "I'm going to stay." Thuron smiled, very small, the way he had smiled at her once across a tray of bread on a back stair. He said, "I know." The hall behind them was quiet. But it was not the quiet of 400 nobles holding their breath. It was the other quiet, the better one, the one that fills a house when the doors are locked and the lamps are lit and the people you love are inside it. "Stay with me," the king had not needed to say. She had stayed. She would stay. And outside, in the long blue evening, the pines moved in the wind, and the kingdom went on, and somewhere far inside the keep, a chain that had fallen on the marble of the throne hall a year and a day ago was still lying in the small wooden box where Bran had put it for safekeeping, untouched, unworn, and never to be needed again.